everybody, it's Lady Shatana, and welcome back to another one of my Getting Started with Minecolonies videos. Today we are talking about the updates to the food system, because there were some pretty big changes that were done after some feedback from the community, which is one of the super awesome things about Minecolonies, is it's always getting better based on what we tell the devs. So let's dive right in. So as usual, I will be using cavern buildings and things like that to describe how it all works, but of course the same huts and the same processes work with every one of the Minecolony styles. And just look at those are updated, those are brand new, super excited about them. Anyway, so we have a little setup here that will hopefully help me explain the basics of the food system, and then we will go on to how all the rest of it works. This is going to be a great video for anybody looking at this for the very first time, or anybody who wants to see all the changes or anything like that. So to get started, of course, to do any of the foods in Minecolonies, you need to have the new Minecolony specific crops. These are a whole bunch of really awesome foods that you can get out in the wild, and the way that you get them is you break different things in the world, like grass and ferns and sugarcane, with a hoe. You can use your hand, but using a hoe will get you a greater yield. There's definitely a higher percentage of getting the crop parts when you're using a hoe. I have not noticed a difference between the various levels of hoe, so I don't notice too much if you get more, say, tomatoes by using an iron hoe than a stone hoe, but I could be wrong. There might be a small difference. It's certainly something that you can check out yourself. Anyway, so the crops themselves are spread throughout the world, and they can be found in different zones. So in all zones, you can find the basics. So the durum, wheat, the eggplant, garlic, mint, and onion, and that's everywhere. Anywhere you break grass, you're going to be able to find these things. In the temperate zones, you'll be able to find bell peppers, corn, and tomato. Temperate zones being sort of the regular ones, the plains, the regular mountains, things like that. In the hot and dry zones, you can find chickpeas and nether peppers, not found in the nether, surprisingly. That's where I expected them to be, but they will be in things like deserts, and that will be where you'll look for those. And then we move on to hot and humid zones, which will be things like swamps, where you're going to find peas, rice, and soybeans. This is where you're primarily going to be looking for the sugar cane to break, because you will get more out of the sugar cane. I do know rice is a pretty rare drop, so make sure you're using that hoe. And finally, we have the cold zones, so the butternut squash and the cabbage. When you're in your colony, if you want to know what items you're going to be able to find and what items you're going to be able to plant, the easiest way to do that is to make yourself one of the farm scarecrows and run around your colony and just drop it down in various places and take a look at what it can grow, which will tell you what you can grow, obviously, and what you're going to be able to find. But we'll talk about that in a minute when we get over to the farm area. So those are the basic crops. You then have a few other things available to you. The large glass bottles, these are something that you can make, or you can make your glass maker do it if you have one set up. The baker will automatically be able to do the large water bottles. The cowhand will be able to collect large milk bottles, and we will talk about that in a moment. And the chef will be able to make large soy milk bottles with the soy, where is it, the chickpeas? Soybeans. And that's something you will need to teach them. The bakery, we will talk about the bakery in full later, but they have a whole bunch of things that they will be able to make, and some items that will be used to make other items, like the flatbread is used in a bunch of different recipes. The bakery still has all of these recipes that come pre-learned, unlike the chef, which you're going to have to teach everything to, but we will get to that in a moment. So there's the bakery, all kinds of fun, delicious things things there. Once you have the ability to get milk or soy milk, you're going to be able to make things like butter and the various cheeses. And once you have the durum wheat, rice, or corn, I should have corn up there as well, you'll be able to make the raw noodles, cornmeal, and cooked rice, which will be used to make other kinds of recipes. And with the soy as well, you'll be able to make soy sauce and tofu. So if you wanted to have a colony that was entirely vegetarian, you absolutely could, using the tofu and the rice and things like that, and all the various vegetables. So that's something to keep in mind. So those are sort of the intermediate ingredients for making all the various foods that will be in the mod, and most of these you are going to be teaching the chef once you have the ingredients for it, but we will talk about that in a moment. So then moving on to all the various foods, I'm not going to talk about each individual food, but they do come in 3 categories. Well, actually they come in 4. So the basic category is the non-Minecolonies foods. So all the regular things like the baked potatoes and the cooked steak and things like that, your colonists will absolutely still eat those, but they won't be happy about it, but they will eat them and they will survive. Then you get into the somewhat acceptable foods, so they will eat these right up until level 5. They'll be happy with it up until level 3, and they'll just kind of, they'll be fine. They won't be happy. They won't be sad. They'll be kind of just like, all right, that was food, and I ate it, and it was great. Then you move on to the satisfied foods, which is something that they are going to definitely want to be a little bit happier once they reach level 3. And then you get into the happy for sure foods, which are definitely more complex recipes. And when you get into level 4 and 5, they are going to be requiring these kind of things to be happy. The really neat thing, one of the big changes that happened with the update, is that these lower level foods you can actually make yourself now. It used to be that only the chef would be able to make all of them. Now you can actually make these and provide them if you want to start giving your citizens some decent food before actually getting your chef set up. So you can actually make these yourself, and you'll be able to see the recipes in your JEI. So that's just enough items, and it is a mod that you absolutely want to have with Minecolonies. And if you don't have it, go get it, because it will make your life so much easier. And what I would absolutely do is I would do a search for Minecolonies, even just Minecol will usually pull it up, and that will give you just the Minecolonies items. And as you can see, we can start seeing the foods here. And when you look at the lower foods, like let's take a look at yogurt, maybe not, yeah. When you click on that, you'll be able to see the recipe and that you can actually make this using soy milk or regular milk. So as with all of these, it will tell you if it's something that you can make. So the cheese pizza is something you can make using this recipe, but the steak dinner is something that only the chef can make, and it will make it at level 4 and 5. So that is how you're going to use JEI to help you know for sure what the recipes are and if you can make it for your people or not. So all of these delicious foods, lots more options, and it's going to be really, really great. So much to choose from. So let's move on to the next step. So once you've gathered a bunch of these items out in the wild using your hoe, you're going to be selecting places that you can plant them. And of course, you're going to have your farmer do that. So you can absolutely in your farmer take a look at the fields and have your farmer farm all these things. Now, as you can see, I have a lot of fields, It used to be that in a regular colony you could get away with having one farmer with a bunch of fields doing, wheat and potatoes and carrots, and that was it. With all of these crops, you are going to need to have a lot more. A lot of people are talking about having 3 or sometimes 4 farmers on the go in a full-fledged colony doing different things. Now, what I do is I build extra fields, and I will have each one of my fields dedicated to a specific crop. And instead of, say, if I have way too many peas, instead of changing this field from peas to something else, I'll just turn the field off and I'll have the farmer farm something else. So say I don't have enough eggplants, I have way too much durum wheat, I'll turn off the wheat and I'll turn on the eggplant field. And so I've always got the fields on the go, but you don't have to have them being harvested all the time or actually being worked by the farmer. So that's one thing that I do, something to keep in mind you may want to do. Everybody does it a little bit differently. So as I was saying with the farmer's field here, you can create yourself the field scarecrow, and as I said, just drop it all over your colony, and when you take a look at the pick seed, you can see what this field will be able to grow. And I have found with 2 of my colonies that I was playing around with, that with spreading my fields over the space of the whole colony, I was able to actually do most of the crops. So you might be going over a couple of different biomes where you can actually create all the different crops. So it's something to keep in mind, and also something to keep in mind maybe when you're choosing a place to do your colony. You may want to select a place that has overlapping biomes so that you can do that. The other thing with the fields is you don't necessarily need a huge amount of a lot of these crops. So you don't need a huge amount of eggplant, you don't need a huge amount of the butternut squash. So you can actually make smaller fields and just go with that. Like, you don't need to have a full-size field, which is the 5 blocks away from each one. So for cavern, for example, I've made these small inserts that go into the connectors, the blank connectors, that have 4 fields. There's 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs, and the fields are a little bit smaller, but that's okay because you don't necessarily need that much of these particular crops. And the other thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to use the fields that come pre-made with Minecolonies, the ones that are built specifically to go with the various styles. You can make your own. You just plop down a field, you tell it what seed, you tell it how big your field is, you make sure that it's irrigated, and that's it. So it can be, you can even have a field that is only like 1 block away, and that's okay. You can change this. You can have a field that's only that big. So just keep that in mind. Like this particular one, it's what's that? 2 blocks, 2 blocks, and I think it's 4 to each side. So you say this is how big my field is. Oh, it's actually 5. This is how big my field is, and that's it. So you don't have to have them full size, and you don't have to have them the pre-made. So that is a big thing to keep in mind as well. All right, so moving on, let's take a look at the, as I said, we'll take a quick look at the baker. The baker does come with some where is it? Crafting recipes. Some pre-learned recipes, and you can scroll through and take a look at what they can do, and they automatically will be able to smelt the things that they're making. So the baker still kind of operates the way it used to. There really isn't any changes to that. Still will ask you for a fuel source and that sort of thing. So that's the baker. So we're not going to take a look at the actual restaurant yet. We're going to go take a look at, where did I put it? Over here. We're going to go take a look at the Cowboy because there are some settings in the Cowboy that are very important to be aware of. So in the Cowboy, you're going to go to the settings, and we still have the breeding on or off, and then we've got the milk item, so you can do the milk bucket or the large milk bottle. There may still be reasons that you need a bucket for things making things like cakes, but most of the time you're going to have it set at the large milk bottle. We then have the milk attempts, stew attempts, and per days. So it's really important to understand how this is going to work. So this is saying how many times is the farmer going to try to get milk into a bottle in a day, or how many times is it going to do it, and then this is how many days in between those attempts. So right now, every single day, it's going to try and get 16 jars of milk every day. Now there is a possibility they can break a glass jar, so in that 16 attempts they may get 15 actual bottles because they've broken one. I don't know what the conditions are for the ability to break a bottle. I know it's not a lot that does get broken, but that is something to be aware of. And the per day. So say you've been doing this for a while, you take a look at your warehouse and you find you've got 20 stacks of milk. You don't need any more milk, but you don't necessarily want to turn milk entirely off because it's being constantly used. You want to be kind of refreshing what's going into your warehouse. So maybe you may want to change it to 2 attempts, but you only want them to try every 3 days. So every 3 days we might get another pair of bottles coming into the warehouse. So that's how that works. This is per number of days and number of attempts. And then stew here, if you're providing bowls to your Cowboy, they will try to get bowls of stew as well. I don't think stew stacks, so that's just something to be aware of with that. So that's what that does. So that's the Cowboy and how the settings for the Cowboy figure into everything else. And of course, you're going to be doing things like getting your chicken herder to come in, and so you'll have eggs for your recipes, and then the pork and the mutton and things like that, the steak, will be used in all the various recipes. So those herders are going to be important. And as you can see, I've actually dropped that set of fields all over the place. I have a couple up here, I have a couple downstairs, so that I have all of those fields. But that might not be how you want to do things. You may prefer to rotate what's in your field as opposed to rotating your fields, and that's totally okay. So now we're going to go down and we're going to take a look at the cookery itself, where the chef is going to do all the magic chef things. And as I said, I definitely got some more fields down here. So the cookery is so if you played Minecolonies previously, there used to be the assistant chef or the assistant cook at the restaurant who would actually make recipe things, and of course we split that off into the cookery. So the chef now works entirely in its own space. So same as all of the other huts that do cooking, they are going to require that you give them a fuel source. They are going to have various things that they can smelt. So things like dried kelp will be a big one that you're going to put in here if you're going to be doing things like oh, my brain just stopped right there. The rice balls and the sushi. Sushi is the word I was looking for. So that's where you will have that happening. So then we get into the crafting recipes. So I've put these in. So the chef no longer knows any recipes right from the beginning. So as soon as you have the ingredients to make some of those basic items like the noodles and the butter and the cheeses and the soy sauce and things like that, once you have those ingredients, you do need to come down here or come into your chef and make sure you teach them the various recipes for these intermediate items. And then when you check to find out what you can actually make based on all the items that you have, and you teach them those recipes. So they're only going to make the things that you teach them. So as I was saying earlier, with the say if you wanted to have an all vegetarian colony, you wouldn't teach them the milk recipes, say. You would only teach them the soy recipes, and you would only teach them the vegetable recipes. So that is where this, and again, this is where the JEI comes in really handy, because you can just do this search and pull up and determine which items. So you're like, yeah, okay, I can make beets, and I've got durum, so we can make the veggie raviolis. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add that. And you can see down here it does say successfully saved recipe, and now when we take a look, we can see that veggie ravioli is in there. So that is adding recipes and how that sort of thing works. And again, making sure you get those basic recipes into the list so that they can make all the things. Minimum stock is something I don't necessarily use in all my huts, but in this one it might be handy to have minimum stock of the basics. So having a stack of the milk bottles, or having a stack of each of the various ingredients that you're going to be using for your recipes, because then when a food order comes in, they already have those things in hand instead of waiting for a courier to bring it from the warehouse. So I would probably have a stack of milk bottles, a stack of the durum wheat, a stack of each of the vegetables I'm using, maybe a stack of, I don't know, if I'm making meat ravioli, I'd use the steak, having the steak in there or something. So again, not something you have to use, but something that could be handy if you decide that you do want to use it. So let's go on up into the final step for how this all works, and that, of course, is the restaurant. So the restaurant is where, of course, your citizens are going to go and get the food and eat the food and be happy with the food. And as you can see, it's a lot simpler than it used to be. They still have the fuel tab here because the cook here can still do very basic things. So if it can just be put into a furnace, pulled out, and eaten, the cook can still do it. So they can still do the raw beef into the cooked steak. They can still do the potatoes into the baked potatoes, things like that. Citizens aren't going to be happy with that because they are basic items, but they will eat them, and it will prevent your people from starving. So you can still have that. And then for the food, so the food this is where things have changed quite a bit. So we now have a menu, and we have the ability to have the restaurant offer up 5 items. When you reach 5, it's going to tell you you've reached your limit, and that's that. So you can only have 5 things over here, and what you may want to have is a selection of things. So you might want to have something very basic that you know you have a lot of ingredients for, that your level 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing, citizens will be able to eat. And then you'll choose something a little bit better, like one of the actual Minecolonies foods for. So once you get these going, I would actually remove any of the non-Minecolonies food once you have the ability to make the lower Minecolonies foods. And once you get into being able to make the higher quality foods, I would probably do that. I would have the higher level foods, maybe some mid-level foods, and a lower quality food, until such time as, say, all of your residences are up over a specific level, like up over level 3, then I would probably take off the lower ones and I would only keep the higher ones. As you can see, the more complex foods are up at the top, and eventually everybody's going to want these, but they are going to want a selection. So don't just choose one item for the restaurant. Eventually your citizens are going to want to have a good variety of foods in order to be happy. So that's how the menu works, and where remove things and add things and get yourself up to your 5 offered items. And of course you're going to put items on here that you've taught your chef so that the chef can make them. So one thing that does come up quite often is that people will get things set up and they'll get those Minecolonies foods in there, and the restaurant has started being able to serve those really good foods, but your people are still yelling at you that they don't have good enough food. The reason for that is because the citizens are not going to eat the new foods until they're actually hungry, and they're not going to eat until they reach 1 shank of hunger on their hunger bar. Let's see if I can find my little where my citizen is, and we'll take a look at that. And so they're gonna keep yelling. So Israel here has a full hunger bar, and they're gonna keep yelling. They're gonna be like, "Hey, I haven't had good enough food in however many days or whatever." But as they work, their hunger bar is going to go down. When they reach only 1 shank is when they will go to the restaurant and actually ask for food. So once you have Minecolonies foods available, you're going to want to make sure you kind of go around and make sure nobody has any of those original foods, so that they don't have half a stack of baked potatoes in their inventory, because they'll eat that. So that's what I would do, is I would do a run around and pull all those basic foods out of the system, basically. And then once they finally get hungry enough, they've done enough work to eat, they will, and then they will stop yelling. So that could take like an in-game week or 2 perhaps. So just kind of ignore them until they stop yelling at you. So I think that pretty much does it. I think that goes over the whole system and all the updates and all the changes and how the whole thing goes down. I hope this was helpful and that everything made sense, and that you'll now be able to have a happy, well-fed colony with all of these delicious foods, and that it will make your Minecolonies experience much, much easier. So with that, I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic day, and that we see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye!